We're here with Christina Hoff Sommers, and this is my first conversation on the new Arc Digital, which is launching, and we're all very excited about it. And of course, Christina and I know each other forever, right?
I mean, my God, we're like two, veterans of like the wars, the culture wars for 30 years.
I know.
Hasn't it been more?
Yeah.
Where did we first meet?
I think we first met when I came to you, because you were in Massachusetts at the time. And I think I came over for this conference at Wellesley, right? And we went there together, didn't we? It was some sort of conference on feminism. And
was it on boys and girls and the girl crisis in education?
No, I don't remember exactly, but I mean, it was this feminist conference, and I remember that we were just sort of thinking that these were really weird people, and now they've taken over the world, right?
Now they have. Then it was a sideshow. People didn't.
Yeah, and I remember that they were, at the time, they were complaining about how very, very few young women were identifying as feminists, and they were sort of dejected about it. And it was in 1992, I'm pretty sure. So
yeah, and then I remember we were both writing about the alleged rape crisis and
right.
questioning the statistics. Do you remember there was a couple? I don't know if they were a couple, but they were two journalists at the Toledo Blade,
right,
that wrote The Making of an Epidemic, and they were writing about this 1 in 4 claim that 1 in 4
right.
girls. And when I read that, I thought, oh, journalists are going to help us out, because that Toledo Blade was a well-respected, award-winning little investigative journal, and they did a great job. And then, and maybe just before that, I had met you, and I just thought, well, we're going to solve this by bringing, better data, criticizing the hoaxes, the hype, the hyperbole. It didn't work.
Right. And I also remember that you did that piece. It was around the same time. You did that piece that I think ran in the New Republic about the National Women's Studies Association conference.
Yes, this insane conference. It was in Austin, Texas.
Right.
And I even took my sister, who was a psychologist.
I remember that, because I remember you saying that there was all this talk about sisterhood, and you actually had a literal sister.
I had a real sister. And she, at one point, she looked at me and she said, I feel like we're at a conference of borderline personalities. And I said, they're just academics. But yeah, but she did find it clinically interesting. And one of the things that happened, even though this was 92, they were already traumatized by charges that the organization was insufficiently sensitive to marginalized groups. So the first day we had to break down into little groups based on our grievances and our healing needs. My sister said, what is it? It's a conference of scholars. And yet it was just a victimology spinning out of control. And there were groups for every conceivable
identity, right? And I remember that. I remember that you had this stuff about somebody. Women. Yeah, somebody saying, as a heterosexual male, between the ages of 30 and 35, with a biracial son or something like that. I feel very vulnerable right now.
Right, but the thing about these groups is they couldn't get along. They would find somebody would be more oppressed. So in the fat group, some of them were gay, some were straight. So the gay people complained bitterly. And in the Jewish group, some wanted to celebrate their Judaism, some wanted to overcome it. And they started to fight. And then even among there was a group of lesbians of color, or Black lesbians, and some of them had white partners. That was a privilege. They were thrown out of the group. And then new identities emerged. There were women with allergies, and they were furious at the rest of us, and they didn't want
anybody. And that was 1994, right?
Yeah, it was early. Yeah, maybe it was 94. Well, no, I think it must have been 93.
93, yeah. anyway, yeah, because I think a lot of people don't realize how far back some of this stuff goes. I mean, all of this was going on. It's just that it was happening at the margins of culture. And,
Exactly.
and
Well, it was happening in sort of out of the way places on campus. I mean, women's studies didn't have a lot of power. I don't think it even does now, except that in those days it was an oddity, and people laughed. I mean, I wrote that New Republic piece, and most people found it funny because of the outrageous behavior.
Well, they're not laughing now.
I know now you
yeah. Yeah, but it's
and I noticed the difference when I go on campus. I give campus lectures, and it used to be, I mean, there'd be a lot of disagreement, but no one was triggered, no safe rooms, no hysteria. Right. I think I dread going on the campus now. Well, yeah, I haven't been able to for a year, but I think it's going to be worse than ever. Don't you agree?
Well, I don't know. I mean, this is actually part of what I wanted to talk to you about, because I was wondering what your thoughts were about where the culture is headed now, sort of post-Trump. But we'll get back to that. Let's sort of get back on memory lane.
Yeah.
So we were sort of in the trenches, and I think it's interesting that the 1990s really were sort of another period, even though this stuff really wasn't nearly as dominant at the time. But that was also a time of a kind of surge in, kind of identity related and specifically feminist activism. There was a lot of stuff going on, like the O.J. Simpson trial, which also was kind of an interesting precursor of some of the issues today, because there was this clash between, race and gender. And I think that was... and it just, I find it interesting because a lot of the time, like when I see people, sort of the young woke, journalists today writing about stories from the 90s, like I've been writing about the Woody Allen drama coming back.
Oh, you've been so great on that, Cathy.
Oh, thank you.
Bless you.
Yeah,
I read his memoir, and I just felt I felt bad for him. I mean, he's a weird guy.
I need to read his
but he's also a comic genius who brought an enormous amount of happiness and joy and laughter to people. And there is no evidence of anything like pedophilia.
Right.
It's just willful. I just think we've become such a cruel culture. That's something I didn't expect. I think this widespread just mercilessness and lack of compassion for people.
Right.
I didn't expect
because I don't think that was around in the 90s, this sort of persecution mentality. I don't
remember. People weren't, they were, we just didn't see that. And another big thing to remember is the first round of the culture war. I had the feeling we won in the court of public opinion. We just think about it.
I agree.
We had, like, New York Magazine had a big cover story about several stories.
Are you politically correct? I remember that.
Right. And then they had some great articles on exposing the hyperbole in the so-called campus rape epidemic. The New York Times with people like Richard Bernstein.
Yeah.
And then there was a group of us, and it felt like we won. There was Katie Roiphe. Yeah. And her book about exposing some of the hype among the trauma feminists. And then it sort of quieted down. And then it felt like, well, I don't want to say out of nowhere. I think it got a lot of impetus in the Obama administration from that Dear Colleague letter, because it made it possible to sue institutions for crimes against the sensitivities.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was sort of on the upswing already, because part of the reason that the Obama initiative happened is that there was a lawsuit that was filed by several women. And I think there was definitely a kind of revival of this activism. See, here's my thought is that a lot of this activism, a lot of the sort of ideological shift, I think it was happening under the radar, and we didn't really see it because it was happening primarily on campus. But I mean, my theory is that part of what's happening now and part of the reason that, a lot of this, and this ideology has so many names, like social justice, wokeness.
And then if you name it, then you're going to use an expression that makes you look like a cantankerous right winger.
Yeah,
so I'm afraid to name
know.
it at all. What
I
someone
know.
today called it social justice politics.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, that was good. I thought that was good.
That piece was good.
Yeah, I think it was kind of quietly happening on campuses. And one thing that happened, I think, is that a lot of the people that we're now seeing, for instance, in the mainstream media in positions of power are people who were,
they're students. They were the students.
Yeah, they
were in those, they were always gender studies programs.
Yeah.
I used to review. Did you ever review the textbooks or look at gender studies textbooks?
A few of them. They're
really expensive. I've had to spend a fortune. I buy them all. They're now so insane I can't read them. And they're not about women anymore. It's only the trans issue.
Oh yeah, right. So that's something that really has changed, I think, because
I find myself, this is funny. I don't know if you've had this experience. I side with some of the same the radical feminists I used to fight. Like, I don't know.
That is a weird feeling, because I mean,
I don't agree with them. I don't agree with them that men are, so terrifying. Obviously.
This is where I'm very divided on this, because, well, first of all, I do think that some of them, and I don't want to say all, because I think there are some very kind of reasonable people and the sort of the gender critical.
We're talking about the TERFs. So to speak. I reject that word.
Helen Joyce, do you know Helen?
Yeah.
She's very sane. She has a new book coming out, and that sounds really interesting.
I just read something great from her, but so many things are in my mind. But
so there are some very, very, very sane people. I do think that some of them really can be kind of hateful, and I think that the thing is that, and this is, I think, what a lot of people don't really get. It's not so much that they hate like trans people specifically. They hate anyone that they perceive as male, so to them, because they believe that, trans women are males, and they're like, oh, like, you're invading our pure womanly spaces with your evil penises,
Right. So, but I think the reason I side with them is because of the tactics used against them.
Oh yeah. No,
I am fighting for their right to have a platform, for their right to publish their books, and I want to hear their arguments.
As
a result, I've gotten to like some of them.
I agree. I mean, I found myself, having a civil conversation with Megan Murphy. Who knew? That was
or was it Julie? Is it
Bendel?
Bendel.
Bendel.
And I remember, and she's citing Janet Raymond. And I mean, these were people that were so radical, and I would quote them because of their misandry. I mean, they really hate and denigrate men. And now I feel protective of them. So here's where we are.
I agree. And I mean, I have to, I was, you probably saw I wrote a piece sort of in defense of J.K. Rowling when that whole, happened. I mean, I was a little disappointed. Like, at some point she quoted something from Andrea Dworkin that just made me go, like, why?
Yeah, I know. God, Andrea Dworkin.
I think she's making some very good points. So it's like there's this whole new battlefield that we could not have anticipated.
And I miss some of my adversaries. A lot of these women, like Andrea Dworkin, could write well. She could speak well. Even Catherine McKinnon was completely mad, but.
Well, she's still out there.
I don't know. She's out there, but
but McKinnon, I think the problem is sort of, aside from her really sort of extremely limited view of sexuality, shall we say?
Yeah, it's just the bed is a crime scene for everyone.
Yeah. She's also the originator of this whole concept of speech as harm, and I think speech as violence. That's McKinnon, And I think that is a sense.
Oh no,
in
the
which-
spirit of McKinnon lives on.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
This is, and I think that what you said before is these young women that went into the workplace, loaded for bear, and they're going to, I think they were McKinnonites or
Oh, yeah.
McDorkanites.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that was powerful at Yale and at Harvard and in these little enclaves in the 90s.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I remember seeing, some of them have written, accounts of how they, came to be, feminists and so on. And you see stuff like, like I grew up believing that as a woman, I had all the opportunities and, I believed that I wasn't oppressed. And then I took a gender studies class and suddenly, my eyes opened and it was this click that made me see the oppression everywhere.
Yes,
click. And today they're bringing this mindset into the wider society. And I think that was another mistake that I think a lot of people sort of on our side were making, because people were saying, what's going to happen to those kids like when they graduate from college and get out into the workplace?
They'll be laughed at.
Yeah, and like when they fall apart if somebody says something that they consider to be sexist, and no one really anticipated that they were going to impose their rules on so much of society. So
well, I have a new idea today. I'm every day. I will never give up trying to fight this, because I feel like I've watched this mugging going on of reason and basic fairness and common sense, and I keep wanting to retire and just I don't want to. I'm tired of this culture war. I'm tired of this fight, but I just feel like I don't want to retreat from the field until it's clear we've got our point of view across and established some restored some sanity. But I just the other day I was reading that someone said, well, they think the reason that we hear all these terrible stories of people getting fired for nothing, or for completely insane processes going on in an academy or a newspaper, is that if you have someone doing their job and involved a dean or someone in HR,
right,
mainly they don't want trouble. And so if there's a ferocious group coming at them, threatening all sorts of things, they'll try to calm the mob. That's what deans do. So I think that what has to happen is there has to be noisy groups coming at deans and demanding the opposite, speaking up for due process, speaking up. So we need our own pressure groups.
Absolutely.
The thing is, we're out. It's not that we're outnumbered, but because of we tend to respect reason and civil argument. We don't want to call people names. We don't want to be hysterical. We're not going to, the people that follow us are not going to show up in a dean's office with screaming or occupying. So anyway,
I think there are some good, there's some good organizations that are sort of popping up. Yeah, like there's this new group that I'm sure you've heard about called FAIR. I think it's Fairness and how do you? I forget, what does it stand for?
I don't know. I get it mixed up with that other FAIR. Remember that other FAIR?
Yeah,
it's an accuracy and reporting, and they were
which is a lefty group, but I don't think that's even very active.
They attacked me for Who Stole Feminism. They were responsible for the Super Bowl hoax.
Oh yeah, right.
That claim that on Super Bowl Sunday battery increases, 50-60%.
Right.
And then so I refuted that. Other people had this great reporter at the Washington Post was the first to do it. And
yeah. But no, this is the group that Barry Weiss and John McClure ran. I'm trying to remember what it stands for, but anyway, it's that looks like a good sort of group championing intellectual pluralism and individual rights. And
you need groups, not just one, you need 10. And absolutely. Lawyers and writers, and I do remember there was.
What we need, I think, is like intelligent pushback against this. And,
Right.
it's not just, obviously it's not just in the universities anymore, because we do have all this insane diversity training where people are told to confess their white privilege. And again, this is something that who wrote about this in the campus setting, and I don't know, I guess he's retired, Alan Kors, who is such
Oh yeah,
guy.
he saw it all coming.
Yeah. He did a piece, which I reread recently. I don't know if you remember that piece. He did a piece for Reason called, I think it was like Thought Control 101. It was about freshman orientation and some of the crazy stuff. And, you read a lot of it and it's like, these are the Robin DiAngelos of their day.
Of their day. And, I was going back and looking at my own book the other day, Who Stole Feminism? And I had forgotten that a lot of the craziest initiatives, there was one called the Curriculum Transformation Program or Initiative. It was funded by the Ford Foundation. So the Ford Foundation gave money to these education activists in gender studies and ethnic studies. They gave them money to recenter the curriculum around, women's oppression and the race, class, gender approach. And so it was started by corporate America or these, corporate foundations. And so I guess we need foundations to fund our organizations.
It sort of, it always amuses me when people start saying, oh, this is Koch money funding all this, evil stuff, this infiltration of campus. And, there's the amount of money on the other side is just insane. I mean, whatever the Koch Foundation gives is like a drop in the bucket.
And now someone's told me, I don't know how to even verify this, but I read that Black Lives Matter has billions of dollars. And is it an organization? Does it have a president? Does it have a board of, it's just very odd.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. But Ibram Kendi got a ton of money.
He got millions of dollars from Jack Dorsey
Center. Yeah, it's insane. So yeah, and of course, the problem is that anyone who gives money to initiatives that are perceived as sort of anti-social justice is going to get hit as a racist. So that's going to be, tough. But we're not giving up, and I think it is, and I think you agree with me that it's really important to kind of not make this a conservative cause, which doesn't mean that we're against conservatives. But
I will say I think Donald Trump made our job much harder. He was the embodiment of the worst case toxic masculinity, and there he was, and it really made the left think, the far left, the loony identity left, it persuaded them that they were absolutely right. And so here we are. I thought he was a disaster. And people said, oh, if I criticize anything going on in the Biden administration, people on Twitter attack me saying, well, you voted for him, that kind of
thing. Right. No,
if we had Trump, well, I think he was, I think he was a real threat to our democracy, not because he was he was a Machiavellian. He didn't have the attention span to be a conspiracy.
No, and we're lucky that he was as bad at it.
He was so bad. He was a complete clown. But anyway, a dangerous one.
No, but I totally agree with you. And as you probably remember, I wrote about this literally the day before the election. I wrote a piece for the Federalist, which at the time was still willing to publish sort of Trump critical stuff. I wrote a piece saying, if you do not vote for Trump if your concern is too much political correctness, because it's going to go the other way. It's going to, persuade a lot of people that, yes, the obviously America really is this white supremacist patriarchy. If we could elect, this guy who calls Mexicans rapists and talks about grabbing women by the what.
Well, but I think someone once compiled a list of all the groups he'd insulted, disparaged, and it was everybody on his list is a loser and a
of course, yeah. So yeah, no, so I think that was I totally agree with you. And I think, and I think we've both seen like some people who were previously sane and sort of on our side suddenly turn into these, like, remember this guy, I'm not going to name names, but there was a guy who sort of followed us both and then he started attacking us. I think there were a couple of people like that.
But we've had a lot of that.
Yeah, because suddenly, like, and I think one of those people actually said to me, like, yeah, I used to, think that a lot of the stuff about, misogyny and racism in our society was totally overblown. But, now after Trump got elected, I see that I was completely wrong and the social justice warriors were right. And so, no, I mean, I think there were a lot of.
I thought you were talking about people, Trump supporters attacking us.
No, sorry.
Oh,
no, there were people. No, I mean, people who sort of like went over to the left in a completely.
I feel bad about that. I feel bad about losing people from, just, but basically for me, it's about preserving
sanity,
sort of sanity, of course, and just the liberal tradition, small L. I mean, it was such a hard fought battle. I was reading this philosopher the other day who was talking about the battle for liberalism, and he mentioned that it was won, but now people take it for granted, so it's not exciting. Right. People don't remember the drama. They don't remember that was where all of the romance and excitement was, defending the free speech and due process, the battle for those principles that have to be protected. So I worry about the left and the right. It just depends on what's going on in the culture. But right now, I'm worried about the Democrats in some of these.
No, and of course we have
cultural...
both been attacked by Trump supporters as well, because I think, I certainly know what you're talking about. Like, all these people who were like, oh, like, you used to be so cool when you were criticizing the social justice warriors, and now all of a sudden you're attacking Trump. Like, what happened to you? You got brainwashed by the Democrat. You've gotten that, I'm sure.
All the time.
Yeah.
I lost Twitter followers, but I'm fine with that, because I just don't care. And I'm happier having, just more people. I mean, I don't know what to do about that, but the fact is that both the left and the right have their pathologies. And I don't know who's, I think right now the left is in ascendance and more powerful. They certainly dominate in the culture. And so that's where I'm focused, but I can be nervous about the right too.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, now we're having really insane stuff on the right, like this, QAnon stuff, and it's like,
that is so crazy. I can't even fathom that they're not joking, but apparently they're not. It's interesting, isn't it, that you can get these powerful, kind of paranoid organizations around the abuse of children.
Oh yeah.
It always works. So you had that with the satanic cults, alleged in daycare centers. And do you remember we both wrote about that, how the feminist organizations like Gloria Steinem.
Oh yeah.
She was, according to an article by a Nation writer, I can never say his name, Alexander Coburn.
Yes.
I don't know if he had a vicious, he wrote this really fantastically vicious article about Cathy Follett. You remember that?
I remember that. Yeah.
And I think it was him that mentioned, or maybe it was you, that Gloria Steinem was actually involved or funded to excavate underneath a daycare center in Santa Monica.
Yeah, no, the McMartin case. Yeah, no, she was one of the people kind of beating the drums on that. And so
there's QAnon. I mean, that's QAnon.
And then remember when Ms. Magazine had this cover, Satanic Ritual Abuse Exists, Believe It? And it was like the scary graphic with a child like caught in the coils of a snake or something. It was
so I'm telling you, it's this child thing. And I think, to be fair, I mean, people today have a lot of problems, saying what's right and what's wrong, but we can all agree the predation against children, it's nefarious, it's evil. So I think that people gravitate to, a cause where they just feel so confident.
Right.
But what about the fact that it's not happening in any way that you are imagining? That's the problem. So it gives it emotional
Tom Hanks
power.
isn't actually like keeping little kids in his basement that he's torturing so he can,
there are two things. So the child abuse, and that people get so carried away that they're willing to carry out witch hunts. And the other is anti-Semitism. So you can always hate the Jews. That's one of the oldest conspiracy theories. So it seems like in QAnon, did they come together? It's anti-Semitic.
I think there's definitely some anti-Semitic elements there. Yeah. So, I mean, it sort of overlaps with the whole, like, the Jewish conspiracy thing. And I don't even know what all this, like, Jewish space lasers stuff. I mean,
see, that's the kind of thing where I'm thinking it's got to be a joke. But
apparently some people really believe that. But there's also the stuff, as we know, also exists on the left. Because remember, there was that guy, the DC city councilman, who posted something about how, the Rothschilds control the weather. And, and he was a Democrat. He was, there's.
That's what I wish if the.
And that woman at Oberlin, remember the Black professor at Oberlin who posted insane like Jewish conspiracy stuff, and it sort of all overlaps with this whole idea that the Jews ran the slave trade.
Oh yeah.
So this is
party
perennial. The loonies of the left and the right sort of come together in mutual hatred of Jews.
So how do we fight this? And those are the
we try to recruit the sane people. I mean, I think there are a lot of sane people out there.
A majority. Look, take something like Gamergate. We were both. We defended Gamergate. That's Izzy. She'll make an appearance soon. There were lunatics on both sides, but the media would only talk about the lunatics on the pro Gamergate side. The antis, they were relatively silent. Not entirely. There were some good pieces occasionally, and what was it in Slate or Mother Jones? Once in a while, you'd get a good article that was just honest.
I think even like at one point I was surprised. Like when I was writing a retrospective on Gamergate, I looked at some stuff that was written at the time, and I came across this surprisingly sane piece in Vox, I think, by Ezra Klein, who basically said that a lot of the people involved in Gamergate are sort of, like liberals who voted for Obama, but they kind of, they like, having sex.
They like their games.
Video games. Suddenly, and they don't understand why they're suddenly being attacked as sexist because, they like, they like babes with, big breasts,
boobs,
and so I think that was so he was one of the few people who sort of said that, and then I think it kind of got lost in the general, and I mean there are just so much, so many levels, like this whole we could talk about this forever, the whole like online harassment trope.
Oh God, that's one of my pet peeves. And it's come up again, like there's all this hysteria. The Columbia Journalism Review just had an article about all the traumatized and triggered journalists and how hard it is, the news cycle, the harassment and so forth.
And women specifically, and that just drives me insane because it's like suddenly like women are so fragile that, if somebody calls you the C word on Twitter, you're just going to fall apart. And
I know. And if you're going to fall apart because of something in the news, then maybe you're in the wrong profession if you're a journalist. That's insane.
Yeah.
This idea that women journalists are fragile little birds put upon by men, and then that sort of damsel in distress. I mean, we had to overcome that. Stereotype. It took a long time, and now it's back. it was in Gamergate too. There was a lot of
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
with people who will go unmentioned. We won't rehearse the whole argument. But the media really got it wrong. You've written very well about this, and others have, but it doesn't matter. I give up. I mean, the media just.
Yeah, that was such a misrepresented story. And, and it did really have an effect on people, because I remember talking to this guy whom I interviewed for one of my pieces, who was a Democrat. He voted for Hillary Clinton. And he basically said, like, there are people who know him, like, including like some like relatives of his fiance, who were kind of giving him dirty looks because they heard that he had been involved in Gamergate. And suddenly there's this trope that, oh, it's this misogynistic harassment mob. And, and I mean, as I think we found, both of us, when we looked into this, it got very misrepresented, because there were obviously, like, there were people, because it was just, there were so many things going on. There were these crazy people who kind of glommed onto it and who did,
that's true
things. But there were perfectly, like, normal people who were involved in this because they felt that,
they felt their hobby was being unfairly attacked. And gamers have always been attacked. I mean, their mothers didn't like the games, and then psychologists said it's going to cause violence. None of this proved true.
Right.
They've always been attacked. And I went to some with you. We went to some gamer meetups, and they were delightful. And there were a lot of women, and they were gay women, and all it was certainly people of color. Yeah, it was diverse. It wasn't at all what they said, and it was a lot of liberals and libertarians.
Yeah, no, it was so misrepresented. Yeah, we were at this meetup where they had a bomb scare. Remember, we had to evacuate.
Yeah, that was fun. Our first bomb scare.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that I left my jacket behind, and somebody had to run in and get it for me. It was crazy stuff.
Yes, and we were at two, because we were at one in Florida.
In Miami. Yeah, the conference.
Oh, that's the one you're talking about.
Society of Professional Journalists.
I was at one in Washington, but you were at the one in Washington.
I was at the one in Washington, and then we were at the conference in Miami, where the Society of Professional Journalists put together a panel on Gamergate. And there were people who were extremely upset because they were doing a panel that had pro Gamergate people on it. It was the same stuff. It was like, how dare you, like, even do this event? And now I don't know if the bomb scare was related to, like, anti-Gamergate people, because I think there were some, like, troll infested boards that just got a kick out of.
There were trolls on both sides. And the worst ones, the ones that were just horribly going after people like Anita, what was her last name?
Sarkeesian.
Sarkeesian.
Yeah.
There was some gamers, many of them were also very good with computer technology. I think they traced it to just some guy in Brazil or somewhere.
And it was actually Gamergaters who tracked them down. Remember, there was a very kind of politically correct, I think Kotaku, or one of those very politically correct, video game magazines, actually wrote a piece sort of acknowledging that Gamergaters had given them, like, the lead to track down
right.
and threats to
there were just so many nice people.
Yeah, and then of course they had to say something like, yeah, well, but they still refused to acknowledge that, like, their criticism, like their attacks on Anita Sarkeesian, kind of helped feed the climate in which somebody would send her threats. And it's like, which is ridiculous, because, they had basically criticized, like, all they had done was to say that her analysis of a lot of these video games is wrong. Like, she's, reading misogyny into situations where it's often, like, not the case at all, and, like, a lot of it is misreading. So yeah,
don't you find that happens a lot, that with journalists, they're provocative, they say things, and then they get criticism, hundreds of angry responses, but one or two people are trollish idiots or venomous, sociopaths, and will say horrible and unspeakable things. And then those horrible, unspeakable things become emblematic of, I'm having thousands of attacks.
Right.
No, you had thousands of reasonable objections with a couple of trolls thrown in. I see this
Yeah, but of
over and
course the
over again.
same, yeah, and of course they never apply the same standard to these like social justice mobs,
Oh,
right?
like, look what's happening with Jesse Single right now.
Oh my God, it's no, that is the most disgusting thing. And I mean, it just really it drives me so crazy that like there's all this talk about the harassment of journalists, and oh my God, somebody got these nasty messages, and somebody got
He is being
it.
professionally, it is an organized smear campaign.
Yeah, like he's being
with
flattered.
I mean, and today there was some, I don't even want to say it, but some guy from an editor at Science Magazine from, he a high level,
I don't know
who called him a transphobic, jerk or something. And he's attacking Jesse because he believes the lies, but you don't hear about that. But
and then of course there was all this stuff about how supposedly like he's stalking trans women in private messages, and then like none of the people who've made those claims will actually produce any evidence whatsoever.
I think I think there was people asked for the evidence from this person who will go unnamed. Isn't it that person in Massachusetts who ran for office? Yeah.
Right. And so, she said, I have the receipts. Right.
She has the receipts. She's been offered $50,000 for those receipts.
Yeah. Well, I think
we've raised it. The Twitter.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just like if somebody is talking about the harassment of journalists and they do not mention what's been happening to Jesse, I sort of know that they're not serious, and that, they have an agenda where the only harassment that matters is something that happens to members of their clique.
And not only that, you and I both have cited studies over and over again, the Pew study.
Oh yeah.
That it's to the extent that there are threats on Twitter. It's more men than women.
Yeah, men are. I think women are more likely to get sexually harassed, which is not going to surprise anyone. Although I think it's also that things I think are interpreted differently depending on whether they're said to a man or a woman online. Like, if somebody says, stuff like, suck my dick, guys get stuff like that thrown at them all the time. And
all the
of course,
time.
Nobody thinks it's sexual harassment. It's just trash talk, and I guess you could argue that it's said with a sort of different message when it's said to a woman, or maybe it's still just trash talk. I don't know. I think that maybe we should all grow a thicker skin. I would say,
or just block people. You can block or you can mute. You don't have to listen to it if you don't want to.
Yeah. Look, if somebody sends you a threat saying, I know that you live at, this is your address, and, I'm coming to get you, then I think you can start worrying and you can call the cops, You
should call the cops. Although I will say, and I have had a few things like that. Has anybody ever carried out? Did anybody die because of Gamergate?
No. And the FBI investigated it, and I think they found like the only things that they specifically found, I think there was like one 14-year-old kid who had sent somebody threats, and then it was like a couple of things like that. I don't think anyone got physically attacked.
So here we have what was allegedly, the most sort of volatile war on social media, misogyny, and nobody was hurt. The times that I've had these I just don't take them seriously. You could imagine getting something, but I was once I think it was at that one of the Gamergate things. We didn't just get a bomb threat. Then somebody threatened to come in with an automatic weapon.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
somebody on our panel got that message. But,
yeah.
And I read, I have it. I keep a little file.
Oh, really?
Of all the attacks and things, because apparently it's currency.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If you're called a fucking cunt or whatever, I have that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I had like genuinely kind of scary experience. This was when I was writing about the alt-right, and some of those people really were just totally vile. I mean, they were the people who were sending like stuff, to Jews, with like photoshopping their picture into a gas chamber and stuff like that. And I actually had like some guy actually did manage to like find my phone number. And he called me at home and he left a voicemail. I think I even mentioned that. Oh yeah, he left a voicemail like reading something from a Hitler speech in German. And then he tweeted about it and it was crazy. And yeah, no, he actually,
wow, I didn't know about
this. He tweeted a recording of like the message that he left for me. And then and it was weird because I reported it to Twitter. And at the time, I think they were much more like lax about enforcement than they are. I mean, now I think they sometimes go overboard, but at the time, like I got a message saying that basically like because he didn't actually post my phone number, that it wasn't harassment. And I'm like, okay, well, that's that's a little crazy. But anyway, yeah, so I did actually report that just in case. I reported it to the local police. And then I spoke to some people who sort of who were tracking a lot of these like alt-right trolls and who knew who this guy was. And they basically said, like, he's totally harmless. And I remember like this one guy said to me, like, I said, is there any chance that he could like actually like do something? And he was like, nah, he'd have to leave his basement first. And he would never do
I know. I'll tell you, occasionally when I've had these kind of messages, I will ask the person, how old are you? When they're using, because if they, and I don't know if they're telling me the truth, but if they're 17, I will try to talk to them because I don't think I mean, American kids know so little about history. I think they're just, they could be reached.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't feel threatened. If they're older, then God knows.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be too dismissive because, when people get into this, neo-Nazi stuff, I mean, obviously there's some potential for some, but I mean, like, look, have you followed, like, there's this group that gets cited all the time as like, oh my God, this group called Atomwaffen, because everybody sort of throws that around. And they always say like, oh, like they've committed 5 murders. If you look at the murders that they've committed, one of those is basically one of the guys from this like neo-Nazi group that's basically just this bunch of like crazy losers. One of those guys converted to Islam and then killed his 2 neo-Nazi roommates because they were taunting him for being a Muslim. Like those are 2 of the 5 like Atomwaffen murders. What the other 2, and obviously I'm not going to take this lightly, but it's also not like this is a guy who like killed his girlfriend's parents because I think they were objecting to her dating a Nazi. So this is like all stuff that is happening inside their own kind of circle of people. And I think there's only one, like of those 5 murders, I think there's one that was actually like terrorism directed at a sort of random person. I think they killed a gay guy whom one of them also sort of knew, but I think they were targeting him because he was gay. But I mean, this is a group of crazy losers who are.
That's the problem
with the
media is that disturbed sociopaths.
Yeah.
Who would be on their own. Maybe they could wreak havoc because they have easy access to firearms, but now they can get together.
Yeah, no, that.
But it's still. But I still have not seen evidence of some, widespread social movement that's anti-Semitic and fascist. I think there's anti-Semitism in the culture, but I don't think it's, or a fascist movement. I just don't think it's.
No, and the reason I mentioned Atomwaffen is that I see them being cited like a lot by journalists on the left as.
How many are there? How many people are in that
there's
group?
This actual like neo-violent neo-Nazi movement that's that's going around murdering people, except it's really.
And it has like 11 members. or something.
Maybe 20, but yeah, but
Yeah, you can
and
find
again,
20 of
I don't
anything.
want to be dismissive because obviously these are deranged people and they could be dangerous, but it's not like this massive Nazi threat.
But you see, that's why it's just would be so great if we had, just curious journalists that would try to get to the truth. I guess the problem is the truth tends to be complex, and it's not going to lend itself to a simple narrative of good and evil. And that's the fashion right now. I mean, I see so many stories in the New York Times. It's not just that I don't learn anything from them. They're unreadable. I mean, aesthetically, I just feel cheated. And it's not only journalism. I'm seeing it in films. I'm seeing it in literature. It all has to be seen through this particular prism, which makes life uninteresting and so predictable.
Right.
And I mean, I'm just so weary. In fact, I've retreated to reading 19th century novels, or right now I'm actually reading 20th century, but early, like, have you read a lot of Jean le Carré?
Not recently.
Well, I never read it because I thought spy novels not for me. They're not just spy novels. He's a great writer. It's great literature.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. But there's nothing politically correct. I mean, he might have been on the liberal side,
really liberal politically, but
yeah.
No, I mean, I understand the impulse to kind of, withdraw from modern day reality, but I think we've got to stay in there and fight.
I'm going to stay in so far as I'm not. But do you feel that you are? Do you worry about Twitter and your mental health at all?
Sometimes.
I do. It makes me. Yeah. I wake up almost every day, and I think, don't do it. Don't look at it. And I think, no. I tell myself it's because it is a good way to kind of check the news. If anything's happening, you'll find out right away. 9 times out of 10, I'll find something that gets me mad. I get involved. I go, deeper and deeper and start. It's exhausting and demoralizing. And but I think I'm addicted.
Probably. Yeah, I think we all are a little bit. But, do you see signs of, do you see reasons to be optimistic?
I'm optimistic simply because I'm an optimist and I know myself, and I know people are never as bad as people think.
Right.
And situations are never as simple as they seem. And one reason the conservatives always talk about the law of unintended consequences. You didn't see these bad things. I think there's a law of fortuitous reversals or happy surprises, good things that we didn't expect. I think like this complete, the culture's now overwhelmed with this critical race theory or whatever you want to call it. It's so dull and simplistic, and it's actually totalitarian in the fact that it just erases humanity and every little subtle difference about individuals. It's inhumane.
It's the politicization of everything, basically.
Everything.
In that sense, it is very totalitarian.
Yeah, and so that can't last. It just can't. So I think it's going to be fun watching it fall apart. And I think, like, one thing I always wonder, like we were talking before about how far back we go fighting. I always thought I'd have more allies. I mean, I had you. When I found you, I just remember being so happy you existed.
Oh,
I think finding you were writing in Reason, and you were writing in the Washington Post, and who is this Cathy Young? And I just, at first I didn't know who you were, and I was just so happy to find you. And then, Katie Roiphe, and there was Mary Lefkowitz and Diane Ravitch, and I don't know, there were just people that were great. But I expected far more to come, to our side and defend classical feminism, that wasn't man-hating, that was about what you defended in your book Ceasefire, which was civility and comedy between men and women, not a gender war. Nobody wants a gender war. But
yeah, I've been thinking I should do a new edition, and it's just
you
right
should.
Now I don't even know where to begin because there is so much going on.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I get flooded because there's so many battles, so many things, so many fronts now. It used to be just a few places that we had to focus, and now it's everywhere. So it's entertaining, but demoralizing and sometimes tragic, because it's, there are real problems in the society.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't see solutions. This is performative madness.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the may you live in interesting times curse. We are living in interesting times.
We are. And I must say it's amusing to me in a way, but there's a lot that you can laugh at. And in a way, I think they think there has to be a healthy impulse in people. I mean, not to hate their own society, especially when it's a relatively benign society.
Yeah.
Compared to everything else. Not, so I think we have to count on those healthy instincts. I don't think a nation is going to commit suicide, but maybe, I don't know, maybe that's what happened in France. You've been writing about the French Revolution. They sort of did.
Yeah, well, I have been thinking about that a lot, and there are some fascinating parallels. And I mean, you can't really compare the Ancien Regime France to modern day America, because that was a deeply dysfunctional society.
That was, yeah.
And I think we, for the most part, I mean, for all the problems that obviously we needed to fix, I don't think we needed to go in this direction. And I think that
I just can't believe the number of young people that say they believe in socialism, and they seem to think that the capitalist economy is responsible for all the suppression. And I don't know. I look at do you read Deirdre McCloskey, and have you followed her career?
Yeah.
I find her very compelling. She calls herself a bleeding heart libertarian.
That's a good, yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
She's a compassionate libertarian.
Partly, I think there is, I think some, or maybe even a lot of, conservatives and libertarians, I think really sort of did not pay enough attention to the problems of the people who were kind of left out of the prosperity and affluence,
and the growing gap.
And I think the pull yourself up by your bootstraps message, I think, works for a lot of people. But like, if you're the kid of a single drug addict who, or even a pair of married drug addicts, you're not gonna, who's grown up in, squalid poverty with, in terrible schools, you're maybe if you're a totally outstanding person, you could overcome that and, and kind of transcend that background. But for a lot of people, there's not going to be that chance. And I think there are a lot of people, I think, on the right, right of center, I think really did not show enough compassion.
And I also think for
people,
a great country like this, if you look at our prisons and what goes on there, the inhumanity and the viciousness, and how we, and I worry that we're not going to be able to address it, because right now the left is so carried away with, abolish the police, or they have insane ideas about what we need to do for reform. But we need reform. We shouldn't, I've seen prisons in Holland and Finland, and they're completely different. They're not, our prisons, if someone goes in there and they have criminal, maybe they're young and they have some criminal instincts, those instincts will be nourished, and they'll come out, worse than they went in. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's just an area where I see there could be, we're in a way, I think it's connected to misandry, because it's mostly men.
That's a good point.
And people who don't care about men, and men of color especially. So I think it's maybe a gender issue as much as a class issue.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because I was I just finished a long essay on sort of why liberals shouldn't like embrace the social justice movement in its current form. And one thing that I point out, which I think you will agree with me, like there's like the idea of intersectionality actually does have like some
merit, yeah,
elements of validity, like where, because I think, yeah, of course, different aspects of your background and identity sort of intersect and contribute to where you are in society. But one of the total blind spots is that because the people who are in this sort of the part of this ideology, because they're totally stuck in these kind of conventional hierarchies of oppression.
I agree.
Like one thing that I find really interesting, I heard Kimberly Crenshaw speak about it shortly, I think it was shortly before the lockdown. Like that was one of the last events I attended. She was on a panel at Columbia, and she was sort of saying that, like intersectionality really, it's just a lot of it is just, very reasonable analysis of how social dynamics work. And she was making the argument that, like for instance, Black women are sort of multiply burdened by both sexism and racism because they experience both. And yes, sometimes that's true. But then, the thing that is a total blind spot is that in many ways, Black men are doing a lot worse than Black women.
Oh, in education.
Yeah, in education.
Most of the benefits of the civil rights movement accrued to the women, not the young men.
In health outcomes, in incarceration,
among Hispanics, it's astonishing how much better the young women. I mean, it's a success story. In fact, I think as of this year, the likelihood of the rate of college attendance for Hispanic young women is higher than for white men.
Oh, really? Yeah, and I know that for in the Black community, the
Black girls are
college attendance for men and women is really like staggering. I think it's like staggering. 3 to 1.
Staggering.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And some
really, like if you want to look at the intersection of identities, you would kind of have to say that in the case of the Black community, it's probably the men who are more likely to,
in terms of fundamental metrics of well-being, education, life expectancy, overall health, it's the men.
Yeah. So like if you're stuck in the mentality that like, only women can experience the sort of double burden of sexism and racism, you're going to miss the men. And I think in case of Black men, like a lot of the attitude, like the view that a lot of the stereotyping of Black men as dangerous, which, plays into the racial profiling by police, that's based on gender stereotypes. It's gender stereotypes plus racial stereotypes.
But the gender stereotypes start even with the parents.
Yeah. Who
tend to hit I think beating children, parental violence, I think it does tend to lead to violence in the child. And there's a lot more violence to male children. I mean, not just it's not African, it's across the board, but mainly in poorer communities, because there's far more of sort of,
right.
It's not accepted as much, and fortunately, it shouldn't be accepted anywhere. You just should not hit children. I'm passionate about that, and I think it's devastating to their identities. But it's very common in poor communities, but it's mainly the boys who get beaten up.
Interesting. And I know that boys are much more likely to be murdered by their parents than
much more likely to be murdered, much more like I'll take almost any sort of, pathology, and it befalls boys more often. I mean, more often murdered, more accidents. I mean, they are different. They are more, on average, more obstreperous and rule breaking and so forth, but that's something we have to meet them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that if you're going to look at like the kernel of rationality and intersectional ideas, I think you have to think outside the box, because it's still sort of stuck in that, box of progressive sort of stereotypes where, it's sort of inconceivable that the double burden of racism and sexism could actually work against men, and that's why like it's missing half of the picture. So,
well, I would add also that if you want to add to your intersectional hierarchy, people with who are neuroatypical.
Oh yeah,
Asperger's, much more common in men than women. I think it's and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, more common in little boys than girls. You factor that in. Now, if you take someone like James Damore when he was at Google and sent out that memo, and it was, I made a video about it, and I mainly agreed with him, but he could have toned it down a little bit.
He could have phrased it much more diplomatically.
It was a little undiplomatic, but he admits that he is on the spectrum.
Right.
So I think that suggests to me that you have some understanding that he doesn't have the sort of emotional intelligence. He's obviously brilliant in many ways, but he might lack the emotional intelligence to express himself diplomatically. So I would think a good intersectional analysis would make a place for people who have a neurological disorder, like that sort.
Yeah, it's interesting you should mention that, because I was actually going to bring that up in this article that I just finished, and then I just, I was already like over 5,000 words, so I thought,
God, what was this article?
This is there's a new publication that's about to be launched called Symposium, which is being launched by a guy named Robert Trasinski, who also writes for The Bulwark. I don't know if you...
Oh, yeah, I like him. I like The Bulwark. I like all these new publications.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited. That's exciting. So, yeah, this is like a new magazine that is sort of basically defending liberal, classically liberal ideas.
I like him. That's great. I'm glad.
So I have this very long essay that I finished about like basically why, because there's a kind of segment of the sort of left libertarian community that is very kind of pro like social justice.
Oh my God, I fight with one of them. I kind of like her because she's.
I think I know who you
know
mean.
who I mean.
Yeah.
but boy, can she be annoying?
Yeah,
and the fact that she's a libertarian.
Yeah, but I mean, they have this whole idea that, you can't, and I mean, on the face of it, I mean, yeah, when they say like you can't really be a libertarian if you don't oppose, the oppression of minority groups, yeah, of course that's true. But, the problem is that the social justice movement as it exists today really isn't about the oppression of minority groups. It's about speech policing. It's about, finding all these incredibly, minute offenses, like somebody wore a Halloween costume. The
Halloween costume. That's so stupid.
I know. And I mean,
it helps nobody. It helps nobody. Does it help people in prison?
No,
does it help people with, who are neglected children or people who are, it infuriates me.
Yeah, no, it is infuriating. So my whole, like, the thrust of my piece was basically like, no, this is, not a movement that classical liberals should embrace. And here's why it's really bad for freedom and individual rights and so on. And, it's really not the right way to go about it. And yeah, I did actually want to mention, and it's also, I really also wish I had spent some time on what you mentioned before about the sort of the cruelty, which is a very disturbing, I think, aspect of this. Like
I never saw a social justice movement. I mean, in my lifetime,
yeah,
that was so cruel.
Yeah,
that gloried in the downfall.
Oh, yeah. Anyway,
of
so I came
average
across this one story, which also kind of ties into what you said about intersectionality and neurotypical people, which just astounded me. This was from one of the, remember when all these student protests began about 5 years ago? This was like the first alarm bell, so to speak. Like, remember when Nick Christakis got yelled at, and there was this.
Oh yeah, that's when I went to Oberlin, and they had a
right
a trigger.
Yeah.
They had a safe room. They had a safe room for Oberlin students to flee in case I said something that made them feel unsafe.
Right. So there was an incident at one school. I forget which school it was, but there was some sort of like racial. Oh, it was the University of Missouri, I think, where there was a student photographer who had taken pictures of protesters, and they were unhappy about it because like they didn't want their picture taken or something.
Anyway, is that where that professor?
Yeah, Melissa Click. So this photographer got it.
Let's bring in somebody here to rough him up or something, she said.
Yeah. So this poor photographer, he got accused of being racially insensitive, and he
was an Asian guy.
Yeah, and he was also, or maybe it was a different guy. Maybe there was a second photographer, but there was one guy who had Asperger's, and he was like dragged before this forum where he was like they demanded that like he had to account for his actions or something. And at one point he started getting like really flustered, and he basically like said, like, you really have to forgive me because like I'm on the spectrum, and I'm really uncomfortable like interacting with people, and like especially like because he was sitting on a stage, I think, with several people next to him, and he was like I get really nervous when I'm in close proximity to people, and he was just trying to explain like why he was getting really flustered. And somebody from the audience yelled "white tears," and then they all started laughing at him. And it was just this wasn't an Asian guy. He was because he was.
No, that's a different story.
Yeah, because he was accused of like using white tears. Because I think he actually started crying because he was so upset. And I just thought, oh my God, like, you people are just awful. Like, what?
I know. I remember.
And again, like, where is the concern? Like, because the whole thing about ableism, like, you can get accused of like being ableist if you use the word blind spot. But apparently it's totally fine to be abusive to a person who has autism. It's just insane.
No, I think we have to push. I think we could save a lot of young men if we push the allowing neuroatypicals into the intersectional calculus.
That is a very good point. Yeah.
And then I think we should look at like what we talk about structural inequality or structural oppression. Let's look what institutions are the most oppressive in our society. I'm sorry, it's not the colleges and it's not the newspapers, it's the prisons.
Of course, yes.
And we should look, and every community should know like what are our jails like, what are our prisons like, and a total review. We haven't had that. We're too preoccupied with, police.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, then we get like the stupid stuff, like, abolish prisons, and Angela Davis, who wants to abolish prisons everywhere except in in the Soviet Union. So,
right. No, I don't want to abolish prisons, and I don't want actually my stepson Tamler is all in favor of restorative justice. I don't want to restore justice with if somebody attacks me, I don't want to have an I-thou relationship with them. If they attack me, put them in jail.
Right. No, I totally agree. No, I mean, I think that the thing that I find interesting, and this is kind of going off on a tangent, but, I think for some of those, I don't even want to say like quasi rape, because I don't really like a lot of the situations that get defined as rape these days, like somebody getting like pressured verbally into unwanted sex, or like, if you having sex when you're like too drunk to consent, whatever that means. I think a lot of those situations, I think, could be dealt with in a kind of quasi-restorative justice framework.
Oh, yeah. I'm talking about violent crimes.
Yeah, but I think those are situations where it could really work. Where,
and that's what we used to do before that Dear Colleague letter in 2011. It wasn't perfect, but deans and various, administrators, if there was a charge against usually a young man, they were able to mediate, talk to them. Often the young girl would want apology,
right,
or they would both be sent for alcohol awareness,
right,
whatever. And that's what happened, which was appropriate, because colleges are, nowadays sort of in loco parentis. That's what you do. The Dear Colleague letter from the Assistant Secretary of Education in 2011 explicitly rules out mediation.
I know. Yeah. And I did that story for the Daily Beast back when the Daily Beast actually used to publish our stuff.
They used to publish our stuff.
Yeah. So
they had some good articles.
I did a piece for them about that case at Brown University. Remember, like Dan Copin, this guy named Dan Copin, and there was he had this crazy on and off relationship with this girl who was like, it's like, she was always kind of blowing hot and cold. Like one moment she would say, oh, we really shouldn't be involved. Then like 5 minutes later, she would come on to him. And, it was just all very crazy, but they were like two stupid, like 19-year-olds. So like at one point, she accused him of rape, because it was one of those situations where they were going back to her place. And I think she did say, like, when they were heading there, or they were going to his place, I think. And she said something like, I really don't want to have sex tonight, and I really don't think we should be like involved with each other anymore. And then once they got there, it's like one thing led to another, and they ended up in bed. And then the next day, she accused him of rape. Okay. And there were lots of details there that really kind of did not sort of, that contradicted her story. Like I think basically like his roommates came home and basically like pretty much caught them together, and she was embarrassed about being, kind of caught in bed with him, but she didn't say anything about, being there against her will. Anyway, so the thing that was kind of interesting and kind of ties into what you said, his dad, like when his parents learned about the rape accusation, his dad went to talk to the dean and said, just from what I heard, it sounds to me like the kind of situation where maybe the two of them should just sit down and talk to each other, because like it seems like the whole thing was a big misunderstanding. And maybe my son was a bit of a jerk, but anyway, and the dean says, oh, no, we can't do that, because we're not allowed to have any kind of mediation in cases of sexual assault.
You're not allowed to.
So that's what happens.
That's what happens. Well, Cathy,
anyway, that was great. That was great. And you never did bring Izzy on camera.
I'm going to bring Izzy. And my nephew's here. Martin?
Yes?
Do you have Izzy?
Yeah, she's here somewhere.
Can you bring her?
Yeah, let's see, because I think the public wants to see Izzy.
The public wants to see Izzy.
Yeah.
Do you know, she hates when I do podcasts, because I have featured her and brought her up as a cute sort of is she there?
She's coming right now.
She's very hard to get.
Well,
there she is. Oh, she doesn't like to be in podcasts, but
there she is. Hi, Izzy. Well, there we go. I think that's a perfect conclusion to our chat. Thank you very much.
Well, anyway, I love you,
wonderful
Cathy.
talking to you.
My ally from the prior wars. Let's just keep on.
Absolutely.
Fighting.
All right. Thank you, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.